Seller financing is only an option if the home is paid off, correct? And would the seller be more interested in seller financing if you agree to take on all repairs for the property? So, seller financing can be done if there's an underlying mortgage on the property. I would say seller financing, there are really two ways that I know of to do seller financing. The first way is for the seller to sell you the home. So the deed transfers to you, and then the seller would take out a first position mortgage secured by that property. That way, the property is already yours. So anybody that looks at the deed will see your name, not the previous owner's name. However, in the event that you stop paying on the financing to the terms that you agreed on, the seller that has that mortgage now is going to have to go through the same procedures that a bank would to foreclose that property and take ownership of it again. So they would have to foreclose on it. The second option available for seller financing is for that deed to remain in the seller's name. And then you do what's called a land contract, where you have the rights and privileges to that property, but it is not going to be, the deed won't transfer until the terms of that land contract are satisfied. And this is an area where I would definitely advise you to get an attorney involved. Make sure this is done the right way. And if you are the seller and you are thinking about doing a land contract, I would make sure that you are very crystal clear on how to get that land contract off of the property in the event that that land contract does not work out. We recently attempted to purchase a property where it was still encumbered by a land contract, and the buyer on that land contract, the seller hadn't spoken to in multiple years. And because that land contract didn't work out, the seller of the property was under the impression that it just kind of went away and it was no longer an issue. However, at this point, we are not going to be able to purchase that property until that land contract is appropriately released from that, which is problematic, as the seller has no idea how to get a hold of the buyer that did so on land contract. So I'd be crystal clear on for both parties on what to do in the event that it doesn't work out, and also just to make sure that you're doing everything appropriately. Now, land contracts can be placed on top of existing mortgages. So in that case, the seller is just going to want to make sure that they have the ability to pay the existing mortgage and also still make a little bit of money over the mortgage. So if the underlying mortgage was for $500 a month, it wouldn't be problematic at all if the land contract was like $1,000 per month, right? That way, the seller would still be making $500 per month, and the mortgage would still be getting paid. So that's definitely a possibility. As far as being more seller potentially being more agreeable if you took on all the repairs, I would say that is probably a fair assessment. But again, I think I would reiterate the fact that when it comes to seller financing, any terms that you two can agree to would be that are mutually beneficial are possible. So, I mean, I could see the seller wanting to be the one that makes all the repairs if they're in the line of business of making repairs and they want to see that property is repaired appropriately, that no, corners are cut or anything like that. Because at the end of the day, the seller, that property is their collateral. So I would kind of double down and say, as awesome as seller financing could be to someone that is in the process of building a portfolio, I would also kind of warn sellers away from it if it is already possible to just go ahead and sell the property in one transaction and not have any ties to it. I think for the most part, unless the seller is like a professional real estate investor or has multiple other properties and they're like really well versed in all things real estate, then the seller is the one that holds the majority of the exposure in the seller financing transaction, because they're kind of banking on you to make sure that you treat the property well, that you run the property appropriately, that you put people that will respect that property into the house to rent it from you. And in the event that that doesn't work out, if you put down a big down payment that you might have that exposure, but for the most part, this property is the only collateral that the seller has. So in the event that you, let's say you make no repairs, you run it into the ground, you don't fix any of the things necessary on the property, you put someone that just tears up the property and does, $15,000-$20,000 worth of damage, which is really easy to do if you're a very negligent occupant, and you say, you know what, this is too much, I'm in over my head, I'm just going to walk away from this transaction, I'm going to default. The seller is now going to get this property back that you have effectively destroyed. So now the money that the seller collected from you for the down payment and those terms, once you default, they just have this horrible property that they now need to put 3 times more money into because you didn't run the property as the seller assumed that you would. That is pretty much the only reason that I would say seller finance is not mutually beneficial. And that's one of the reasons that I would definitely say, even if offered seller financing on like one property, I'd be more tempted to get that seller out of the picture, just because I don't necessarily think that seller financing is always a win-win type scenario. I think the seller has significantly more risk and more exposure at stake than the buyer of that contract. Thanks for watching that clip. I thought that was a good question. And I think you can ask good questions too. Join us every Friday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a live stream Q&A where we answer plenty of questions just like this one. In the meantime, consider subscribing to the channel if you want more of this content. And if you want to increase your deal flow, analyze properties better, and help me feed my family, click the link below for a free 7-day trial of PropStream.